Anyway, moving on. Next thing we're going to talk about is immigration, because I keep seeing a lot of dumb stuff come up about immigration. So we're going to... This is not vodka, it's water. I'm a drunk, I'm not that drunk. So, because I keep seeing stuff come up about immigration that is just... It's so stupid. And it's so misleading, and nobody checks the math or the numbers or takes just 2 seconds to think about anything. Okay, so we're going to do this in 2 parts. I'm going to make it quick. The first part is conceptually. We're not going to talk any numbers. We're just going to talk conceptually. Why does people coming to your country, immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, whatever it is, why does people coming to your country almost never hurt your country, let alone destroy it, which is the rhetoric that you hear in the United States all the time? Oh, immigrants, they're coming over in waves, they're destroying America. No. So let's talk about why. We live in a liberal democracy capitalist society, and that is the prevailing type of society in the entire power center of the world, so essentially the West. And even though China is a very large economy and they're not liberal democracy, they are still capitalist. They're state-controlled capitalist, but they're still capitalist, so this applies too. The most important thing in a capitalist economy, especially a modern capitalist economy, is the growth of consumption of goods. So the more goods that you can buy and sell in an economy, as it can be services too, it doesn't just have to be goods. So, hotels count, even though you're not actually buying anything from the hotel. It's still a service, so that still counts. Goods and services that you can buy in your economy, you need to sell more of them to satisfy the debt that has been taken on to produce those goods. So if a company starts a business and they get a loan from the government to start their business, they need to make enough money to service that debt and pay back the government. Now, in order to do this, they need to draw money out of other people's funds and into their bank account to then pay back their loan on. But if they're drawing funds away from somebody else, if they're drawing funds out of somebody's pocketbook that would have otherwise went to another business, well, now that business has lost business because the one that took out the new loan has stolen some of their sales away. And then that will cause them issues for servicing their debt. And it ends up being like, you end up having this like hard barrier in your economy that you can tweak it with some, fiscal policy and stuff. Japan's basically been doing this forever. Their economy has neither grown nor shrank very much in the last 30 years. And they're just chugging along just fine. But in the United States, growth is the name of the game. So in order for the new company to not take money from another company who needs that money to service their debt, and to have them not take money from another company and just down the line, slowly, siphoning money from a bunch of different places, you need to be able to produce more goods. And you can do that one of 2 ways. You can increase the number of people making your goods, or you can increase the efficiency of the worker. And despite what many detractors would tell you, the United States has ridiculously productive workers. Like a United States employee absolutely kills it on the world stage for production. We make more than Chinese workers. We make more than Spanish workers. We make more than French workers. We make more than Mexican workers, Canadian workers. Exceptions being Japan, Germany, I think South Korea now, but I'm not sure about that. But there are some countries that outproduce us per person. And there are lots of countries that outproduce us per hour of work. You know, a lot of other countries, especially in Northern Europe, they don't work as many hours as we do. So naturally, their people are going to produce less if we work at a similar rate. They outproduce us per hour, but not in total, because the United States works a dumb amount of hours. We're right up at the top of the list for number of hours worked in a year. So we produce a lot of stuff. There's not per person. There's not a lot of room left to extract more stuff out of American workers without automating everything. And honestly, we're coming up on a wall for automation because we basically automated away all of the jobs that are simple, repetitive tasks, like putting plastic in an injection molding machine. We basically don't do that by hand anymore. The machine puts the plastic in the injection molding machine. We'll just load the plastic into whatever receptacle the machine uses to put the plastic in it. And it's that way with a lot of stuff. Amazon has automated away basically all of the roaming around a warehouse to pick stuff that people would do. Now, in most Amazon warehouses, you stand in a spot and robots bring you the stuff. And you pack it up and put it on the conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt takes it away somewhere else. So that one person becomes way more productive once you include the robotic help. And the United States economy doesn't have a whole lot of room to automate away more stuff. So, like for example, the flat roll steel industry, where I come from, is a super generalized field. You have to be able to move. You have to be able to move product which weighs multiple thousands of pounds, up to like 50, 60,000 pounds sometimes. You need to be able to use a bander. You need to be able to package stuff on skids, use an ID grabber, use chains. You need to C-hook, run a crane, run a forklift, strap stuff down to a semi-truck. You need to be able to load it on the machine. Then you have to load it through the machine. You have to set the machine up. Like, there's so many steps in the process that would require all automating in different ways that it's basically not really possible to automate that away. And that's essentially the limit that we're hitting in the United States with basically every field. There's some places where it's going to come up, but automating away producing things is starting to hit its limit in the United States. We're not going to get much more per person out of a U.S. employee. So the other way you do it is by bringing in more workers. So there's more people making the stuff. And then as a result of the more people making stuff, you have more people spending money, because if there's people here working, then if they're working, they need to buy gas, they need to buy food, they need to buy clothes, they need to buy housing, they need to, like, everything that you need to live in your economy, somebody else also needs to live if they're here working. So they're producing more. And then because they're producing another person's worth of product. Then because they're producing another person's worth of product, they get paid money for that work that they then spend in the economy, which then creates more opportunities for more business, and it's a pile-on effect. The more people you bring in, the more people there are to do the work to grow the economy so everybody can service their debt. So there's almost never an instance where bringing in immigrants to a country will cause a collapse of the country. Two exceptions to that. One, overpopulation of a given area. The United States has 330 million people in roughly the same space as China has, like 2 billion. We are not that densely populated. Europe is more densely populated than the United States. The United States has a lot of undeveloped land that we can afford to use for growth, use for housing. Not to mention we have a housing crisis in the United States because there are lots of houses sitting empty that people just can't afford to buy. And there's also perverse incentives for companies to build apartments and to build units that are too expensive for the average person to rent, to buy, to lease, whatever it is you're doing. Anyway, all of this is to say that the United States has the space, it has the capacity, and we have the natural resources to handle incoming immigrants. So overpopulation is not an issue that the United States is going to run into because of immigrants coming into the country. We're not that overpopulated. The second one is if they come in too fast, because it's all good, it's all fine and dandy if a bunch of people show up and they're all spending money in the economy, if they can get around. They can, if the roads don't get overcrowded, if the hospitals don't get overfilled, if the water system can handle them coming in, if the plumbing infrastructure is up to date, if the electrical grid can handle the excess power, if all those things are non-issues, then yeah, bring them on in. But if you don't have all that stuff in place, you don't have the housing, you don't have the infrastructure in place to deal with those people, then you have to limit the speed with which they come in so you can build all of that stuff out. So the question becomes, can you let immigrants in at a rate that doesn't exceed your infrastructure limits? And can you raise your infrastructure limits fast enough to deal with the incoming immigrants? Those are the only two questions you need to ask yourself if immigrants coming into your country are good. Because there's, like 7 billion people on the planet, and like a few thousand like run the world, and all the rest of them are just people trying to live their lives. So like the chance that you're going to get somebody who's going to like do something terrible in your country is so minuscule relative to the number of people that are coming in that it's essentially a non-issue. You could let millions of immigrants into the United States, you would still be more likely to die in a car crash, and yet you take that risk every day. You would still be more likely to get hit by lightning, yet plenty of people walk around outside in a thunderstorm. So it's not a big deal. So let's talk some numbers. I pulled some numbers up earlier. Let's see if we can make some sense of them, shall we? All right. So we're going to talk about the rate of people coming into the country. So, in 2020, we had a huge drop in the number of people coming into the country. Obviously, COVID had just hit. So there was a little bit of a pent-up desire to come to the United States after the lull that happened in 2020 because everybody was afraid of COVID. So right now, 2021, 2022, 2023, we're having a larger number of people try to cross the border than we have had in recent years past. But given the downturn that happened in 2020, you can see right here, we're chugging along right about average. We're not that far out of the water yet. But this chart right here shows you the number of apprehensions and the number of immediate deportations done during fiscal year 2021. Information wasn't released prior to 2020, which is why you don't see it here. All the rest of it, the blue bar and the orange bar are lumped together in all of these years here. So you can see all the way back in 2000, we're cruising right about 2000 territory, maybe a little more at the moment. But given the drop in 2020, we're not that far off the average. So anybody who's telling you that there's suddenly like a crisis at the border and there's so many people coming around, 2020 was a slow year because of COVID, so all that pent-up desire to come to the United States sort of got let loose in 2021. Same in 2022. So we're not so far above the multi-year average right now. So, but you'll see we're at about 1.5 million. I think it's 1.6 if I look. Yeah, 1.66 million immigrants encountered. Those are the ones that the Border Patrol or ICE or Customs caught, apprehended, and either processed or immediately released. So these are not illegal immigrants in the country. These are ones that were caught, they were apprehended, and they were caught, they were then processed for release into the country legally, or they were immediately deported back to their country of origin. So I found another page, I found another article. The information was buried in it, so I wasn't going to go back through it and find it later, but it basically said that estimations predict that there's a little over 550,000 immigrants that made it into the United States illegally and were not apprehended or deported in 2021. So we're at about 500,000. That's the number of people that came in illegally. Okay, so keep that number in your head. This right here is a running total of the number of legal immigrants coming into the United States. I got this directly off the Department of Homeland Security website, so I'm not entirely sure why 2021 and 2022 are not on there, but this is the most recent up-to-date average that we have. So we've been hanging right about 1 million. So you figure on average, we're probably looking at 300, 400,000 illegal immigrants that were not apprehended and not accounted for in the statistics potentially. Although this number does include illegal immigrants that are known to the state. So obviously not necessarily where they are, what are their names, what are their jobs, but like they know that there's roughly X number of illegal immigrants in the country at any given time. This number includes that. So this is the number that came in. So you'll see we're hanging right about 1 million people. So this year we're probably looking at like 1.5 million, maybe 1.6 million. So like 1.6, 1.5 million people came in 2021, 2022. Those are new immigrants to the country that are known about. So our second question for if immigration is a problem is, are too many people coming over the border too quickly for the infrastructure and for the society that's accepting them to deal with all these new people that are showing up? And there are two things that you need to consider when you're talking about that. The first one is how many immigrants are coming in. So we figured it's about 1.5 versus how many legal U.S. residents are leaving willingly. And what's really interesting is we have about 2.83 per 1,000 people, or per 1,000 people leave every year. So if you do that math out with the U.S. Population, you end up at 940,000 people. Most of those going to Mexico. Mexico actually results in a negative immigration statistic on the United States. More people leave to go back to Mexico now than come to the United States. So we're getting like 1.5-ish, 1.5, somewhere around there, coming into the U.S., and we're getting about 940,000 leaving. So that leaves us with 600, 700,000 fresh immigrants every year to the country, against a population that had 3 million babies. U.S. born women, U.S. citizens, had 3 million babies in the United States last year. So the immigrant population coming in is less than 1/3 of the number of babies born in the United States. Economically speaking, they are a non-factor. More people are born in the United States and move throughout the United States, especially in 2020 and 2021, than more of them move around the United States than immigrants come into the country by far, and that internal migration and internal birth rate creates a much larger or would create a much larger strain on the economy, provided people weren't dying, but people are always dying, would create a much larger strain on the economy than immigrants coming in. Because, like, if somebody lives in LA and moves to Boise, Idaho, there needs to be a house there for them. There needs to be infrastructure there for them. The roads have to be wide enough. So if thousands of people move to Boise, Idaho all at once, and there isn't space for them there, then internal migration in the United States can cause the same issue as external migration into the United States. And the internal migration into the United States and the birth rate far exceed the number of immigrants coming into the country, and the economy just shrugs it off and keeps on going. So again, like what's the issue? People fear-mongering all the time about immigrants coming into the country, and they always give you like the raw headline, like 1.66 million people intercepted at the border in 2021. But they never go, okay, how many people are leaving the United States? What percentage of the people that are caught at the border actually get past the border? What percentage of the people, or what percentage of people encountered at the border get past the border patrol? How many people going over the border never even get seen by border patrol? What's the number of immigrants coming in legally? How many of them are seeking asylum? What is the death rate in the United States? Where are all these people going? Are they going to cities that have the infrastructure to deal with them, or are they landing in some town in North Dakota with 200 people in it? You know, all of this stuff matters because the United States is gigantic and the infrastructure is so varied and built out to such varying degrees that, like, where they end up, how many people go there, really matters. And when you do just a little bit of digging, it turns out that actually nowhere in the United States are immigrants creating a strain on the system. They're not overflooding hospitals. They're not clogging up the roads. They're not taking jobs away from anybody because they're not taking jobs away from anybody on any kind of mass scale because they're coming here and they're spending their money here, which means that there's more money floating around in the economy for more people to buy more stuff, which means more jobs. But you never get told this. Granted, I know it took me a minute to get to this point, but you never get told this. Nobody shows it. Nobody shows it in the media. Nobody talks about it. It's all hand waving and just cheap shots about numbers with no context and where they're going. And when you just dig a little deeper, just go one step lower, you'll realize that it's not a problem. It could be a problem, but we're so far away from the line where it becomes a problem that it's not even worth worrying about. That does not mean open the gates and just let everybody in. We still need to control the amount coming into the U.S. because we can't have too many come all at once, and we especially can't have too many end up in border towns right across the border. A lot of the towns are not built to handle that many people coming in all at once. But as you can see, just simply from this statistic alone, the number of people being apprehended and processed properly or turned away at the border, people talk about how bad Biden's doing on immigration. He's like, the policies are working for turning people away. Now, I'm not making a moral judgment because I actually think that U.S. immigration policy is massively immoral the way that they treat these people, especially people claiming asylum. But to act like immigrants are just flooding over the border and they're ruining the country by like creating all this strain on stuff or taking jobs or bringing like massive amounts of like crime with them, it's just not true. We as a country can handle the number of people that immigrate to the United States every year easily, especially when you subtract the number of people that leave every year. especially when you take into account that the U.S. birth rate has been basically flatlined with the death rate for like 6 or 7 years now. So the only way the United States population increases to make more money, to produce more things, so there's more people with more money spending more money so the economy can grow, is by bringing in immigrants. You never hear about that either. It's all a big pile of shit whenever anybody in the media talks about immigration. And it's sad because it's not complicated. It just takes a little bit of explanatory power, a little bit of integrity upon the part of the journalist covering it, and there just doesn't seem to be any. It's either outright lies or exceptional laziness whenever covering this. Unless you go hunting for it. I mean, honestly, the print sources on immigration, they do pretty well, but, you know, how many people read nowadays? So, yeah, just don't worry about immigration. It's not a big deal. It never has been a big deal. It won't be a big deal. As long as the country doesn't just open up the border and just let everybody come over and fill up all the border towns that don't have the infrastructure to handle these people, it will be fine. And especially knock off, like do not support Greg Abbott just bussing people around the country and just dropping them off. Like, the reason the reason you don't do this is because in addition to the infrastructure that needs to be in place to handle these people once they get to where they're going, you have to have a system in place in the place you send them to set them up in their new permanent place where you send them to. And the places where border patrol and there's border crossings where immigrants can come in, all of those places have the infrastructure in place, the programs in place, the systems in place to properly place these people. But just busing them to DC or to liberal cities as like to make a point is so stupid. Like, you're playing political you're playing political patty cake with like people's lives. And yes, I'm sure they're happy to be here, but as we know, being homeless in the United States sucks. And I'm sure a lot of these people are going to end up homeless unless some, government official really, really gets a handle on these people when they arrive on these unplanned buses from Texas. And at the moment, there's no good solution. There's no spaces available to house them temporarily. There's no like they just show up. And it just pisses people off. It pisses people off because they are like, oh, a bus full of immigrants. Oh, look, the immigrants are coming. Oh my God, it's terrible. It pisses people off because there are people who care about these, that care about the well-being of these people, that want them to be here, that want them to do well, and then seeing them treated like, like they're not even human. They're just like a target to be thrown around back and forth, just to point your political ire at, is like just awful. And it just makes people mad. And it's just, bussing people around like that is just a recipe for just all kinds of like hatred. And it's a political stunt ultimately on Greg Abbott's part, because he knows there aren't so many people coming over the border that like Austin, Texas can't handle it. He knows Dallas could handle it. He's the governor. You don't get to be the governor without having some people around you that know. Like, even if you're too stupid to figure it out on your own, somebody around you is going to be smart enough to figure it out. But he don't care. He's just trying to win political points with his base. So, immigration is not an issue. So, for the love of God, stop freaking out about it. Please.